things that I know about experienced fruit pie bakers, specifically people who make crusts, is that there's a part that fills the bottom of a pie shell, and there's the part that covers the top, unless it's a deep dish, and then there's the part that overlaps the edges and gets cut off. And experienced pie bakers are experts at doing that. I got to observe it again the other day as we all got together to bake pies for the Auto Expo. Now, I'm no expert myself, but I do enjoy watching people who know how to bake pies skillfully and efficiently. And what do you think happens to those parts that overlap the edges and get cut off?
Reused.
Okay, they're not tossed into the trash. They're not put into green waste. They're reused. They're pushed back into the bits of other unused crust in order to be rolled out again and used in another pie. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. And my mother reminds me that when I was a child, when she would bake a pie and there wasn't another pie to use the last bits of crust on, she would place them on a baking sheet, put sugar and cinnamon on them, and bake them for an after-school snack. Did anybody else ever do that or experience that? Okay, many of us did. Okay. Well, my favorite phrase from today's story, the feeding of the 5,000, is Jesus saying after the meal, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." Pieces and crumbs of bread and fish tails and heads and bones are probably not as easy to reuse as leftover bits of unbaked pie crust. But apparently, it's important to Jesus, especially as we come to know him in the book of John, that nothing and no one be lost. You may remember in another part of the church year that later in the garden, when Judas comes with soldiers and police to arrest Jesus, he says, "If you are looking for me, let these men go." And we're told, this was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." So, if Jesus had been a child like one of us, I would guess that he had been scolded too many times for losing things. Over the next 5 weeks, we'll be spending significant time in the 6th chapter of the book of John. It starts out with a passage that we hear today, and we've all heard different versions of the story. There are 6 of them in the Gospels. But the version that we hear today has some very interesting things to say about Jesus, whom people are following to experience more signs. Signs that point to Jesus as an extraordinary, unique man of God. And over the next few weeks, we'll explore his unfolding identity further. But for today, I want to point out 2 different issues. The first is the idea of Jesus not losing anything or anyone. And the second is this. John is the only gospel that says that the loaves were not wheat, but barley. Now, barley loaves were what the man brings to Elisha in our first lesson, an offering to God from his first fruits, the best he has in the form of a tithe, a tenth of his harvest. Those barley loaves are also used to feed many people, with some left over. But we don't know what happens to the leftovers. Is Jesus being compared to the great prophet Elisha on a much greater scale? Most likely. The other thing about bread made from barley is that scholars say that barley bread was the bread of the poor. Jesus takes a few loaves of barley bread and a couple of stale fish from a young boy whose family is not wealthy, but who is willing to share what he has. I can imagine that a few years earlier in Jesus' culture as well as our own, that same boy or his sister might have tried to share with any passers-by some excellent mud pies. I'm sure we've all had that experience with children who are learning about the value of abundance, and that even though they are young, they have something worthwhile to share. A few years ago, Ren bought the game Catchphrase to share with the family. And if you're able to join us for game night on Thursday night, I'll bring it along. It's a timed game, a little like charades, where you're given a word or a phrase that you have to make your partner or your team guess using only verbal descriptions. I'll never forget the time that I got the word worthless, and I had to make Ren guess the word. I said, "You have no value." And even though she knew what I was doing and guessed the word right away, my simply saying that to her brought spontaneous tears to her eyes, and she was surprised to react so emotionally. Of course, I told her right away that I loved her, as she received my expression of love with a rueful laugh. So, imagine Jesus instead saying to you, not only are you not worthless, but whatever you bring out of your riches, your poverty, your quirkiness, your youth, your age, or even your bad experiences, all of it has value. I will not only multiply it so that it blesses others, but even the leftover fragments I will gather. They also have value. Psychologist Carl Jung talked about the shadow side of each person, that part of yourself that's mostly the opposite side that you present to the world. He once said, "How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole." There can be dark stuff in the shadow. There can also be gold. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Christian writer Anne Lamott came face to face with her shadow side a few weeks ago when she used the social media platform Twitter to make what she thought was a funny comment about Caitlyn Jenner, who's a transgender woman, formerly known as Bruce Jenner of Olympic fame. People who live their lives under public scrutiny sometimes make mistakes. And it was her son Sam who helped her to see what she had done, and who acted as a gentle intermediary, bringing grace into the situation. He started out by addressing her on Twitter and saying, "The tweet is not truth, love, or funny. I'll explain it all. Let's start by deleting it." And he added in a separate comment, "You can be part of the noise, but when the noise dies down, you'll wish you were part of the change, and it lasts longer." Then he addressed her followers on Twitter, who were reacting with surprise, anger, and sadness. He said, "Everyone gets to make mistakes. It's a shame this lesson is so public, but the best lessons are often painful and embarrassing." Sam added, "I know it's shocking. When the adrenaline wears off, remember that before you knew about transgender issues, you didn't know." And finally he said, "I learned about transgender issues from a close friend who was willing and patient to answer my ignorant and incredibly personal questions." Finally, Twitter heard from Anne herself as she responded, "I am so sorry to have caused pain to people in the transgender community, especially to parents of transgender children. You are loved and chosen." The world is changing rapidly. There are times when even someone like the wonderful and widely admired Anne Lamott will say something that she later wishes she could take back. Sometimes after the loving encouragement of someone like her son Sam. It's as if Jesus were saying to Anne, "These are poor fragments, but I will gather them up and make of you a more aware and sensitive person. Nothing about the much-loved person you are will be lost, but through my love and grace, it will be transformed into a blessing for everyone around you. Theologian Phil Hirsch says about our text for today, "Come, pick up some broken pieces of bread and God will feed you. Come share in a meal that will multiply inside you with the love God has for you. God can take whatever it is that you have brought here with you and turn it into something that is finally fulfilling. Christ alone can satisfy the heart that is hungry for something more. We know of a love that has height and depth and width to it. It has a tangible presence in this bread and wine, but also in the community of people who gather here in this church. God met the real needs of the hungry people on that hillside, and God can do the same for you. Today, right here in this moment, Christ is coming to you and saying, 'Here I am for you.'" Before we share in the sacrament of Christ's body and blood today, I want to tell you that our bread for today was baked by Perry and is gluten-free, of the type that I and others can eat. So I hope you enjoy it. I leave you with this blessing from Ephesians. May the Holy Spirit strengthen you with power. May Christ live in your heart through faith. And may you be rooted and grounded in love. And may you have the power to comprehend with all the saints the breadth and length and height and depth of that love. May your hunger be filled with all the fullness of God.